blow it in the playoffs.
The Maple Leafs are back, and so are we. I'm Joe Choffs with my boy Coach Frank for the Puck and Leafs podcast. The offseason is over. Training camp is here, and we're like the Leafs, Frankie. You know, offseason, we go on a couple weddings, couple vacays, drink a lot of, have a good time. And now we're back to put in the work, get ready for the season ahead. And I think it's perfect timing that we start recording again anyways, because by the time this gets out, I'm going to assume that the Blue Jays will be out of it by then and be eliminated. So everyone will then turn their attention over to the Leafs, and then we'll have Leafs content for them. So I think the timing is perfect. We are recording this on Tuesday night. The Jays just lost 3-1 to the Twins in game one of that series. Any thoughts before we get into the Leafs? Because Toronto sports, you just shake your head at it, right?
We're okay with mediocrity. I still think that's what we are. You know, we're just
happy to be there.
Happy to be there, right? Like, you know what spoiled us was that Raptors championship in 2019, right?
That was the one anomaly.
You know what, Joe? Listen, I think the Jays are a weird team only because there was like so much like potential with them, and they thought they were going to hit a lot better. Just the whole year never happened. Who thought the Mavs were going to come alive in like game one of, a wild card in Minnesota? And what I love about that is that they play the one team that Kevin Gausman has the worst record against. And number two, they haven't won a game in 18 years. And sure enough, the Jays are the team to do it for them. So
when I heard that stat, I'm like, oh, they're losing game one. Jays are 100% losing game one, because when you have a streak like that going, you see a Toronto team coming in, you're like, yes, this is the day, boys. This is the day that it finally ends. And lo and behold, it's exactly what happened. That eighth inning was like a total microcosm of their entire season. You get Vladdy, it's a leadoff double, and then 3 terrible at-bats follow that with both striking out in 3 pitches, Kirk doing terribly. Like, they just no timely hitting. There's no clutch. And that's what you mentioned the Raptors. That's why it felt so weird during that season, because they were so clutch. Kawhi was like the most clutch player I've ever seen. Usually we're used to our big players not being, whatever the clutch is, they're the opposite of it come the big stage and the bright lights of the playoffs. So
I find it amusing that I can just you can tell it all with that play where they finally get an error that goes their way with the shortstop that booted the ball, and Bichette goes home and gets thrown out at home. So they finally get a break, but then the guy gets thrown out at home.
They give it right back. Yeah.
And then, Schulman was saying, how important Alejandro Kirk was to this team when Danny Jansen got hurt. And I'm saying to myself, yeah, he's having trouble hitting. Like all you needed was that young up and coming catcher to really, be excited about it. And sure enough, Gabriel Moreno hits a home run for the Arizona Diamondbacks tonight. And Dalton Varsho is on the bench because they pinch hit it for Whit Merrifield. It's the perfect storm, man. So anyways,
all right. Enough of the Puck and Jays podcast. Let's get back to the Puck and Leafs podcast. So just to refresh over what happened in the offseason, the biggest news obviously was the Leafs re-signing Austin Matthews. It let a lot of Leafs Nation sleep better. I think people would have been really nervous going into this last year without him signed, especially what we saw happen with Gaudreau in the past, and he's an American player playing in a Canadian market. So once that gets out of the way, now the attention turns to Willie Nylander because he's in the last year of his deal. And I guess I'll ask and start by asking, do you foresee this being, do you foresee that this can possibly turn into some sort of circus with this Nylander situation? Or do you think Willie's just the type of guy that just to play it cool, it won't bother him, it'll just kind of be in the background, and then they'll kind of sort it out as the season goes on or after the season?
If anybody have seen Willie Nylander in front of a camera, this guy knows the Toronto media. Like, he plays the Toronto media so well.
But that's why he's perfect for this market, because
exactly. He said it very simply, guys, I'm not going to say more than I want to be here long term. This is where I want to be. I leave everything else up to my agent. Right? He's given the whole spiel. I actually truly believe that. Like, the guy loves the city, right? And if it doesn't work out, we're going to point the finger at management to say, were you really going to let him go for $500,000 or $1 million? What I think the wrinkle in this whole thing is now is, and if this stays the way it's looking in the preseason, we're talking about William Nylander, the top 6 right winger who finally hit 40 goals. Now we're talking about William Nylander, third line center, a key position where this team has lacked in the past. Listen, you're not going to get any Selke votes for Nylander, but what you're going to get is a third line center, potentially a second line center, depending on how the lines fill, of another line, driving a line of scoring, of depth scoring that this team needs so much in the playoffs. And let's see how long it lasts, because who knows? You could get 20 games there, 40 games there. I don't anticipate you're going to have injuries. You're probably going to move around. But could this be a versatile player now, which would bode well for a $9.5 to $10 million player? So you can look at it and say, are you going to pay a third line center $9.5, $10 million? Or is he going to be the second line center once Tavares' contract is up? You know what I mean? So there's different things to.
It's a good point, because Tavares only has.
I see this. Yeah, I see this in a
left.
different way now. And I tell you right now, Joe, he's not going to be a trade. They're not going to trade him. They are too good.
Well, they can't at this point. If they were going to trade him, they had to trade him before the draft when everybody had a little bit of cap space in the offseason. Mm-hmm. Now it's just like you got to ride it out. And I heard like someone ask a question like, well, what if the Leafs are like in a wild card spot come the deadline and they're like barely making the playoffs, so they trade him? Then it's like, no, because you're not going to get what he's worth anyways. So at that point, he's worth way more to keep and to try to go on a run with him than it would be to try to acquire some sort of asset, some sort of future asset, I'm assuming.
And unless you were getting, and this is just my opinion, unless you were getting a top pairing defenseman in return, you were going to lose a deal. Nylander, to me, is that good. He's that talented. Yeah. You put him on any team in the line. I don't care. Even Edmonton, he's playing beside McDavid even with Dry. You know what I mean? So he's a top line player. What you lack defensively, you gain with skill and offensive awareness. Again, he's a 40 goal scorer. Not many of those in the league. And you know what, Joe? Of all else, I'll end it on this. We have a few of them in the lineup. I would rather have a guy on the last year of his deal motivated to go into free agency to make as much money as he can with the cap going up. Those are the type of guys I want in my lineup. So if I get a very highly motivated Nylander, if he prices himself out of Toronto, hey, good on him. But those are the type of guys you want in your lineup.
So in training camp, they've obviously tried him a lot in the third line center role, like you mentioned. I think they're going to give this some runway, at least a quarter of the season, to see how it goes. He did play center growing up, so I think he's a little bit familiar with the position. I think if they put him in a position to succeed, and what I mean by that is give him a lot of offensive zone starts, give him good matchups. Mm-hmm. If you can get him out against other third and fourth lines, that is a huge mismatch.
Exactly.
And that's what you're hoping for. You don't want him in defensive starts against the other team's first line. And I'm sure they're going to try to protect him in that regard. I think it could work. Now, I was at the game against the Habs in Toronto, what would be last night, but by the time this comes out, it could be a couple nights ago. I wasn't crazy about the line with him and Domi and Robertson. But that's just one game. It's a small sample size. I think if he has a guy like Domi with him who can put the puck in the net, and then someone who's a little bit more defensively responsible, maybe on the other side, which could help them, but also can still play. That's, I think, the ideal type of move that you're looking to make in that role. So
there's some battles going on for that third line spot. Yarncroke hasn't.
He's been a mystery this whole training camp.
That's where I think you add a nice defensive element by adding him on the right wing there with Domi and Nylander. I think that would be a nice little caveat to that line just from a defensive standpoint. But, if Nick Robertson is not playing on one of those top two or even maybe three lines, he's not a fourth liner. There's some interesting things here. But what I was a little scared about was David Kampf again going into this year as the third line center, because I didn't know who was going to be the fourth line center. And I know we'll get to the roster thing in a minute, but like, thinking about this even more, having Nylander there tells me two things. One, it allows you to slot in Kempf on the fourth line, who could always move up in a third line role to protect the lead, because you're going to shorten your bench when you get in the last,
Good point, and that's why you're the coach.
8 minutes of the game, right? I'm not having Nylander in there with like 3 minutes left. Kempf takes a lot penalty killing draws, last minute, and you know what I mean. So he has.
Or you're moving Nylander up with the top two lines for the wing.
If they need a goal,
yes.
Nylander has the experience to play with Matthews and Marner and Tavares, and so like. We always say, give it to use it. U.S. Thanksgiving is kind of the time where you really assess your team as to what you need, what you don't like, what you can probably move. This is the time, right? And I haven't seen anything other than what I've seen in preseason to say like Nylander is going to start on the second line right wing. I think you're right, Joe. He's going to start there. I think having Domi there is a nice piece where he can add some offense. Listen, Domi was excellent with Chicago the last couple of years, playing in a first line role. So now in a complementary role on the third line with Nylander, I think it's a great spot. And what they were actually doing too is Nylander was taking draws on the right and Domi was taking draws on the left. And Domi played a little bit of center as well in Chicago. So you know what, Joe? Having Robertson there to start might be what they do with the injury to Yarncroke. And you know what? I'm okay with that. You might see Lafferty maybe come down and Robertson up. There's so many options. But
see, I've really liked Lafferty with Tavares and Nyes. I think that's been their best line in the preseason. Again, small sample sizes. They played 2 games. Really, it doesn't mean anything. But I've liked what they've shown.
But the last thing I say on Nylander is this: why now have they come up with this idea to move Nylander third line center? Seriously, why now? I think my conspiracy theory is this was a Dubas thing. I think Dubas always wanted him up there, and I think he had a lot of his thumb on Keith. And I remember Keith saying, or was it somebody said, maybe it was Treliving, like, you can now let Keith coach. I think Keith finally has done some things where he wouldn't have done in the past if Dubas was there. And this Nylander thing at third line center, I think is him in a way where I think he's always wanted to see him there, to be quite honest with you. And that's just my conspiracy theory to all this, because why hasn't he tried this in the past? Well, now I think we're really going to see Keith coach. I'm not saying it was the right thing or the wrong thing to bring him back, but now that he's in a comfortably uncomfortable scenario with a new GM, I think now you're going to see some things that he may want to try. Holy shit, Austin Matthews is penalty killing now. Nylander's penalty killing now. Nyes is penalty killing now. Well, This is different. This is different. So let's give it a shot.
You just touched upon something that I wanted to get to, but and I guess we can get to it right now if you want.
Yeah.
I think because I was at the game yesterday, like I mentioned, Matthews and Marner, they're going to score a lot of shorthanded goals this year. They had a couple chances just last night that they could have scored on that just missed out. It only makes sense. Austin's always been a good defensive forward. Why not try him on the penalty kill? Other than they were worried about him, blocking shots and getting hurt, but he blocked shots anyways. He's got the most blocked shots of any forward, I think, in the past season. So it only makes sense. I don't know why they were reluctant to try that in the past.
I know the guy plays over 20 minutes a night. I'm talking about Matthews. He plays a lot. Keith, that's something, love him or hate Keith, one thing you can say about him is the guy relies on his studs, on his stars. He plays them a lot. Marner plays penalty kill. He plays power play, he plays even strength. Matthews is so good defensively. I was waiting for them to try this, and he actually came out and said, I've never played penalty kill until I got to the Leafs, even in junior or in Switzerland.
That's crazy to me.
Said
no other coach thought,
he's never played penalty
kill. He's the best player on the ice by far. Like growing up, if you're a coach, Frank, and you have Austin Matthews and he's lighting it up,
of course. But
any
maybe
way to get him on the ice.
I don't know. Yeah. But think about it like this. Yeah, you're probably going to generate a lot more chances being down a man. But do you really want Austin Matthews, taking a more higher percentage of taking a shot off his foot or something? Even though I know he blocks a lot of shots already, but again, Joe,
That's what will stop it, Frank. If that happens and he breaks his foot and he's got to miss 2 months, he'll never kill penalty ever again.
I honestly think, again, let me look at the roster just off the top of my head. You got Marner, you got Kemp. Looks like Nyes is going to kill some penalties. Gregor, if he makes the team, Lafferty, and you can throw one more there. Do you really need?
Kemp is always a
I mentioned. Did I mention Kemp?
Okay, sorry.
Okay. Anyways, you got 5 or 6 guys. Do you really need Matthews to do it? I don't know. He'd probably be my 6th guy. But if you need a goal down to man, maybe. But I don't see it happening, to be quite honest with you. I think this is another thing that preseason they're going to try, but I don't see it as a long-term thing.
And so you mentioned Nyes. Mm-hmm. They were trying him on the penalty kill. You think it's for sure that he's starting the season with the big club, right?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
So it doesn't matter if there's cap implications. They're going to try to make it work because he does not have to clear waivers to go down.
No, I think if it's a paper transaction, that's just a paper transaction. They did it with Liljegren or Sandin a couple years ago. Robertson last year, he went down for 1 or 2 games because they'd be cap compliant. But come on, man.
He's impressed,
man. He's their best player.
Yeah, he's looked awesome. But again, it's just preseason and small samples, but he's looked awesome. And I think him and Tavares have a good little chemistry together already, at least from the action that I've watched. So
I was watching the game against Montreal, and you remember
he's so strong on the puck. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Oh, no, 100%. I'm saying to myself, I'm watching the game, and we used to come on here and complain, why aren't we starting Matthews and Marner in overtime, right? We still always say that. You started, Kemp for Tavares, and I say to myself, I wonder what they're going to do now. Joe, if you really think about this, in overtime, you now have options of Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Nyes, Tavares, Domi, Robertson is left off. Like, you have all of those guys. So technically, where Nyes plays, anywhere is really going to be a fit because of what you mentioned. One thing they've always lacked before even, after Hyman left, was a guy who chases the puck, wins puck battles, is strong on his stick, is strong in front of the net. They didn't have that. I'm not saying this guy's Matthew Tkachuk by any standards, but he may be one of those unicorns where it's like he's big enough, he's strong enough. Don't know if he's tough enough yet.
I don't think he's mean enough. He doesn't seem that way anyways.
But you now have a sheriff there on the 4th line where all I hear about is this intimidation factor that Reeves brings. He may get to take some liberties knowing that he's got some protection, right? And Joe, he's young, but he's a mature young player. And maybe going back to college and dominating was great for his confidence because he stepped right in. And, if this guy plays about 17 to 18 minutes a night and can move up and down your lineup, that's the Christmas gift that just keeps on giving, right? So looks like he might even get some time on the second unit, which trying to crack that top unit's going to be tough, but it's okay. I think he's going to slot in well. I think you're right. He's going to start with Tavares and Lafferty because that's what they've been going with all preseason. And you got 2 guys who can wheel. So Tavares, all I got to do is put a stick on the ice and head to the net, and that's a real score.
He can still finish, that's for sure.
That's for sure. Yeah.
And Nick Robertson, I think he's going to start in the Marlies. I think it'll be better for him, to be honest. I think he just needs to play like a string of games, not get hurt, build that confidence back. He doesn't have the same confidence that he had when he was younger. And he needs to bring some of that back, and I think it'll be good for him. I think he's like one of the first call-ups that when someone gets hurt, they'll bring him back up.
The thing about Robertson for me is he doesn't fit in the lineup. And I don't mean that he's not good enough. What I mean is, you look at the first line. Is he going to take out Bertuzzi? No. Is he going to take out Nyes? No. Lafferty? Maybe. But when Yarncroke comes back, you're probably putting Yarncroke in that, in the second or third spot there. Robertson doesn't kill penalties, so that's where you need Lafferty, right? It looks like Noah Gregor is going to make the team because they need that 4th line and a guy who can kill penalties. So there's a role there. And are you really going to keep Robertson as the guy in the box or a rotational guy?
No.
And I don't think they have the cap space to do it. So
that's right. Bring him down, let him play.
The thing that Robertson has, that's probably one of the better things on the team. He's got a pro shot. The kid can absolutely fire the puck.
Yep.
But I think for a guy who's had a lot of injury history, who hasn't played a lot, he's never put a full season together. I don't think he's even put a half season together, to be quite honest with you. I think you're right. He needs to go down, play a lot of minutes with the Marlies. As soon as there's an injury, he comes up. If I don't think the Leafs are going to try to flip him because you're probably trading him at his lowest value too. But I think you're going to need guys from the Marlies. It's straight out, and there's not a lot left because they did lose some guys in free agency and trades, etc. So guys like Abrazizi, Steves, Robertson, they're not really. Robertson's probably the only guy I would say like, oh, he's got to come up. Holmberg maybe as well. So it's really not a lot there. So you're right, Joe. I think. I also think they might carry 7D over an extra forward just for the injuries that are going on right now. So I hope
unfortunate for Connor Timmins. He was looking great in the preseason and he gets this injury.
Preseason scoring leader.
I wonder if he would have been in the top 6 to start the season, because I know that they wouldn't have put him on waivers with him playing like that.
No.
But I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens.
I think he would have. I think Giordano, he's looking slower, and obviously that's 40 years old.
He's 40, yeah, no doubt.
The fact that he's, playing at that level.
Playing is unbelievable, yeah.
But I think you're going to see a rotation you were going to see a rotation between Timmins and Giordano. I think what I've seen from Liljegren is I think he's taken another step in the preseason, to be honest with you. He's got this edge to him. I saw the last couple games that he's played, like, oh my God, like, if you slot him beside McCabe as a nice little shutdown pair, I'd be okay with that. You have Riley Brody, which it's not ideal, but there's some familiarity there. I'm not in love with the defense, Joe, but I think it's a start where they can probably
nobody is.
They can probably get by till November, December-ish before something has to give.
Like, remember, they were 7th in the league in goals against last year. This team is a good defensive hockey team, forwards and D. But yes, the defense doesn't scream out to you Stanley Cup caliber.
No,
because it's missing a couple pieces. It's missing a guy on the top pairing probably, and it's missing a guy who's really tough. Like Luke Shen came in and nobody expected him to fill that role the way he did last year. He was unbelievable. Yeah. And I understand why he took the money, and I understand why the Leafs did not pay him the money.
Yep.
But they've got to go out and find that element, because they're missing more of it, and you need it in the playoffs. Absolutely do. So, we know that Treliving likes those type of defensemen too. It's one of those things where, remember the Leafs last year, their roster after the deadline was much better than before the deadline.
Yeah.
Same thing's going to have to happen this year. They're going to have to try to accrue some cap space, guys on LTIR or whatever, and then make moves at the deadline and try to strengthen it. And a guy like the Russian from Calgary, Zadorov, that's the type of guy like they need to add.
Well, that's the thing. I was going to say, it's like, Treliving has a history of, if there's a name out there, he's making a call. Not saying he's making the deal, but he's making the call. He's traded for Dougie Hamilton in the past. He's signed Tanev. He's got that propensity to add those a good hard defenseman to his lineup. And I loved Calgary's defense. Like, you look a couple of years ago, I loved Rasmus Andersson. Tanev was a nice addition. Zadorov, when they came over from Colorado, the guy was leading the league in hits by our defenseman, right? So those are the type of guys, right? So I think he's not stupid. He's already said that the type of D he's looking for. If Calgary gets off to a bad start, where he's going to be looking, to be quite honest with you. And I think they're going to try to do what they got out of Luke Shen with keep your eye on Simon Benoit. He came in from Anaheim last year. I watched anybody didn't really watch a lot of Anaheim games, but he's a big defenseman. Rough defenseman. He's obviously going to play bottom pair minutes, but a guy when they lost in Justin Hall was a shot blocker. They really don't have a lot of those on the back end. Benoit can at least block shots down low. So that's a guy who probably can fill in those gaps a little bit, but definitely
he's not even going to start the year with the team, is he?
Oh, he's playing. He played the last couple of games. Yeah.
Wow. You think he's going to make the team?
Let me ask you a question. Have you heard his name?
No, not much.
Then I call that the Carl Gunnarsson approach. If you don't hear his name, he's probably
doing his job.
That's the way I put it.
No, fair enough.
So,
how have you liked Tyler Bertuzzi so far this preseason? I know, same thing. You're giving a face like, meh.
He's there.
He's just there. Like, he just
He reminds me of the guy. It's like, okay, can we just get this over with now and let's just get it?
Yeah.
Because that's a guy
But he can't hide it on his face
I
that he's
always
just
had my eye on
going through
him.
the motions.
Whenever he
Yeah.
played the Leafs, he was a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
The guy was everywhere. He was in front of the net, causing shit. He's not. People think he's a tough, rough player. He's not. He's actually very smart, but he makes his living in front of the net. The guy had 5 power play goals in Boston in the playoffs. You know what I mean? Like the guy.
I'll sign up for that. I'll take that.
I'd actually might even have him instead of Tavares, but that's another story.
Hey.
I listen when a guy is like that in front of the net, that's just my opinion. But I think he'll start with Matthews and Marner. He might slide down with Tavares at some point. I'm sure they're going to try some stuff around, but Bertuzzi's a guy who's got a very underrated skill set to him. He actually moves the puck pretty decently as well. He's a guy who's got to stay healthy to be effective. So ask me this again after about 15, 20 games when he gets acclimated with Matthews and Marner. Because if you're telling me I'm playing with Matthews and Marner, I don't take that lightly, especially for a guy, again, like Domi, like Nylander, who's in a 1-year deal, betting on himself. You're going to get, hopefully, the best version of him. And what better way to do it than playing with Matthews and Marner? So,
yeah, like you mentioned, like they're going to give Nylander some runway at center in the third line role. They're going to give this some runway probably to that American Thanksgiving. And then Keefe does like to tinker.
He does.
But
yeah.
I wonder if it's working. This is like the one line he never touches.
It could be the new Hyman, Matthews, Marner, right? So.
Yeah. And what do you think? So before we get into some little fun that we had planned, the third goalie situation. So we know they've signed Martin Jones. He's played really well in preseason. He had a good year last year.
Yep.
If the Leafs put him on waivers,
he's gone.
And he's gone.
He's gone.
100%. And they're not going to put Joseph Wall on waivers because they'll lose him too, and they don't want to lose him. He's young. They've developed him, and he looked good last year as well. You don't want Marty Jones to somehow end up in Tampa, because now you look over at Tampa, who've lost Vasilevsky for the first 2 months of the year, and they're in a little bit of a pickle here. They could have a rough start that could really cost them. You don't want to help them out by any stretch of the imagination. So putting them on waivers, not really a great idea. You almost would rather go to a team and be like, give me something. Give me something so you get them, and Tampa doesn't. Or they have enough cap space to somehow keep 3 goalies on the roster.
So that would be my number one priority, only because.
Really, eh?
I'll tell you why. It's almost like fantasy football, and I do. You're gonna put a smile like what's because you obviously you are in the same league. Sometimes you have to take a player or pick up a player off waivers just so the other guy doesn't get him. Yep. So I'm saying to myself, Jones is exactly what Tampa needs. There are only a couple teams out there looking for a goalie as a backup, and Columbus picked up Spencer Martin from Vancouver, which a lot of people said he wasn't going to survive the waiver. So there was one team that they needed him. Off the top of my head, I really can't think of anybody else that really badly needs one. Maybe did Colorado make a deal for goalie not too long ago? I think they did. But what I'm getting at is Tampa's the obvious one. Am I saying Jones is going to be the answer? No, but could he keep them afloat? Because I see Tampa as the same as Toronto. They're good enough to get decent goaltending to win games. Vasilevsky is going to come back, right? So,
see, I don't know, Frankie. Like, I think that's a team that could shockingly miss the playoffs this year. They've lost so many good players in the last 2 years, and now they don't have their all-star.
I've learned not to count them out because they're still good enough to at least lie in the weeds, as we like to say, and get in that wild. Would you want to play Tampa in the wild card?
No, absolutely not. And that's the Leafs finished first in the Eastern Conference, and then they're rewarded with the Tampa Bay Lightning in the first round. That would be ultra Leafy.
And here's the other thing that works against the Leafs. Jones is on a one-way deal worth the league minimum. Okay, that can fit under a lot of teams' cap. So on the other end of the spectrum, we're talking about Martin Jones, who has, let's see, his career save percentage, 896, 896, 896, 900, 887. So did he have a good year? Yeah. Is he amazing? No. Are you going to lose sleep over it? No. So here's what I would do if possible. I would keep him, let the waivers go through first to be cap compliant, then dangle him for what you need. Do you need a depth defenseman? Can you get something like that out of somebody and make a swap because it's a cap in, cap out move? Or can you get an asset for him? Can you get a pick? Can you get somebody for the Marlies or with some upside? There's going to be teams maybe after who don't get the waiver pickup that might be desperate to make a trade. So if they can, that's what I would do. But I actually fully expect them to hit the waivers, unfortunately. Because you can't lose Wall. I think Wall, he's got the upside there. So I think Wall might even be the starter come Christmas, just to be quite honest.
Ooh, hot take, Frankie.
Yeah. I just don't see Ilya Samsonov has rarely ever put two good seasons together. So that's just
this is the year. This is the year to start.
Right? Yeah.
All right. Just before we get out of here, we want to have a little bit of fun. And for people that haven't listened to us for a long time, we used to do this segment where we would say it's the Legends Row of potato chips, and we talk about the best potato chip flavors. It could be anything random from that to something about the actual Leafs. And today, because we're still talking about the preseason, we are going to do the Legends Row of preseason hype players. So any player that was getting so much buzz in the city in the preseason and then kind of just fizzled his way out of here afterwards. Do you want to start or shall I?
Please, it's all yours.
Okay. I don't know if he did. I can't remember him doing incredibly amazing in the preseason, but I do remember the hype being around this guy, and he was probably one of the worst signings this team has ever done in the history of this franchise. And I'm talking about David Clarkson.
Of course.
Because when they signed this guy, they had the Wendell Clarkson thing in the newspaper, and then they were interviewing him nonstop in that preseason. They had ISO cameras on him, talking about how he's going to make them so much more physical and so much harder to play against. And 2 preseason games in, he jumps over the boards to get into a fight, gets suspended 10 games, and the rest is history. Everything's downhill from there.
If that's not the leafiest thing ever, he was the number, and it wasn't a great UFA crop that year, but he was the
top guy.
We got the top guy, and then somehow we traded back for him a couple years later in a cap compliance move to activate Mitch Marner, or remember that one, or sign Mitch Marner, or whatever it was. I just thought that was funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that was just how many Clarkson jerseys you saw. Oh my God. Oh my God. Okay. My name. I got a few here, but I think the one that just jumps out at me, and I was so excited too, because it was a sweepstakes. It was Monster Watch. Who would Jonas Gustafsson choose coming out of Sweden? We couldn't take Vesa Toskala anymore. This guy was the savior. 6'5", 205 pounds from Sweden. Goalie couldn't miss. The first preseason game makes a 2-on-0 save against, I can't remember what team it was. It's on YouTube. Maybe it was Detroit. A 2-on-0 glove save. They were chanting his name, and nosedive. My guy is Jonas the Monster Gustafsson.
Couldn't stay healthy.
Nope.
Excuse me. Sorry. Couldn't stay healthy. Had a lot of health problems. And then his play deteriorated from that point.
Very quickly.
Yeah. I remember being in university hearing about him and going on hockey forum boards and trying to find just give me a little highlight about this guy. I want to see what this monster's all about. And then when they signed him, it was Brian Burke is going to Sweden to go get the monster. That's where he was July 1st. He went to go get the monster. Oh my God. Good one. Good choice. Okay. I'm going to go with, people may not remember this guy, but Brandon Kozin put together one of the best preseasons for the Leafs a couple years ago. Makes the team at a camp. I think he scored I did not look up the stats for this, so bear with me. I think he scored 5-6 goals in the preseason, looked hot, and then he made the team and didn't score after that into the regular season. And then I think the following year he ended up in Russia, and we haven't seen him since.
It's a good one. I like that. It wasn't too long ago, but again, going into the KHL, he was the prize free agent outside of the NHL.
Oh God, I know what you're gonna say.
And 49 points in 59 games
for a defenseman.
For Jokerit of the Finnish team. This guy was like a bullet from the point, bronze medal at the World Hockey
Championship. Just what we needed.
All that stuff. And the guy didn't get into like 13 games to start the season, and they flipped him to Columbus. Mikko Lehtinen, if you remember this guy. And let's see, I'm looking at his stats here.
It wasn't just Leaf fans that were hyped about him, though. Like
it was
when they signed him. I had Habs fans that were like, "Oh, I can't believe you guys signed
the
him."
The Leafs were even not even on the radar, not even on the radar. And he was supposed to sign with Columbus or Tampa, whatever it was. And this guy he has a gold in the Olympics, 2 golds in the World Championships, a World Junior gold. So he was well revered outside of the NHL. And out of nowhere, the Leafs signed this guy to a 1-year deal, and then they ended up flipping to Columbus. It was for I think it was like a goalie or something like that, a really bad goalie. And his stats were 9 games with the Leafs, 3 assists, 17 games with Columbus, 17 games, 3 points. Didn't really have that impact that everybody thought he did. So it wasn't just the Leafs.
Did not last long in the NHL. Let's say that. Good one. Okay. I'm going to go back to you because I can't even think of any more right now.
I got a name for you. Now, he was a draft pick to the Leafs, but he made the team think like out of nowhere. And this is a good one because this is the one that came to kick him in the ass, but there was so much hype about this guy. Then they actually used him as trade bait. And I'm going to go back to a defenseman named Kenny Jonsson, if you remember this guy.
Oh, how can we forget? They traded him for Clark when they got Clark back.
That's the one, and that's where I'm going with this. This is what's led to the Wendell Clark back and forth.
Frankie, this is before many of our listeners' times.
Kenny Jonsson was a 12th overall pick from the Leafs, but ended up actually making the team the following year, which back then was almost like unheard of, right? And had a so-so start with the Leafs, and they ended up putting him in a deal packaged for Wendell Clark. And he ended up becoming the captain of the New York Islanders. So, go figure, right? I would have kept on to Jonsson, but the second coming of Clark wasn't really the greatest. But
it was not.
It is. No, it was not. No.
All right, give us another one. The last one.
Okay.
The last best one.
I was thinking between one of the two, but we go to just an honorable mention before I give my last guy.
Sure.
I don't even know if you know this guy, but I've had this guy in my vault just to use his name on this show. I think I finally had the opportunity. But before I get to that, one honorable mention was back in 91, the Leafs made a trade for Grant Fuhr, if you remember. They brought him over from the Edmonton Oilers, and he wasn't very good. There was this little-known goaltender that they drafted. I believe he was drafted in 1990. Yep, 31st overall, 1990. And came out of nowhere to steal the job. And the big hype between what they were going to do with this guy, Grant Fuhr, and I believe it was Rick Wamsley at the time, and it was just a crowded crease. And he ended up beating Grant Fuhr in terms of the crease and trading him to Buffalo. And that was the preseason hype of Felix the Cat Potvin.
Okay, I'm going to push back on this one because the hype may have been there, but Potvin didn't fizzle out, man. He had a couple really good seasons with
no, he didn't fizzle out. But what I'm saying is, when we're talking about, I said honorable mention of preseason hype was
fair enough.
You call it preseason hype, right? So that was
preseason hype, but like didn't live up to the hype afterwards. Is what I was trying to get at. But fair, I'll give it to you. Fine.
That's honorable mention.
Only because I like Felix the Cat. I'll allow him to be on this list. But
this name for me, if like I follow the Leafs. I'm 39 years old. Been following them since my first breath. There was a guy in the mid-90s. Whenever there was an injury, his name came up. If it was a forward, if it was a defenseman, if it was a goalie, somehow everybody said, bring up Lonnie Bohannes. This guy had amazing preseasons with the Leafs from like 95 all the way
Really, he
to
had an
98.
amazing playoff with them too. The 99
He had an
playoff.
amazing playoff with them, but the guy couldn't stick. He was injured, but he always had amazing preseasons. He would lead the team in scoring in 2 preseasons and couldn't stick with the club. And the poor guy ended up in Vancouver, I think it was, and then ended up in Switzerland. He actually had a career-ending neck injury, which actually almost killed him.
Did not know that.
But that ended his career. But I just remember, like, bring up Bohannes. He'd be perfect beside Gilmore and Andrewchuk.
And he would score a couple points.
To 98. That's all I ever heard was Lonnie Bohannes. I'm sure people that would watch us would remember the name, but that was the most obscure preseason hype you would ever get from a Leaf fan.
I think part of it is the name. It's so unique. Lonnie Bohannes.
He's Canadian. He's Canadian.
Yeah, of course. But like
Winnipeg boy.
The name sticks out, and there is like Leaf lore behind that name. You say Lonnie Bohannes to a Leaf fan, and they'll know exactly who you're talking about. If you're from our era, anyways. If you're like from this new era, you have no idea who we're talking about. But maybe you just learned something right there. So there you go, Lonnie Bohannes. Go look him up, and go look up his highlights in the '99 playoff. They were good. All right, Frankie. I gotta say here, we've been off for a while. Didn't feel like we had much rust.
Nope.
We shook it off pretty quickly. I thought you were on fire for most of the show until your Felix Potvin answer. That's okay. It's okay. We all make mistakes here and there. So we'll come back another time. I know we're going to give our a couple predictions for the year, a couple bold predictions, and we got to get Bobby in here to get his take. It's always good to get Bobby in here because he balances us out, right? We're too much fan. Sometimes the fan kicks in too much in us, and Bobby is like
Sometimes.
part of a voice of reason. You know what I mean?
Well, he's a Canucks fan. There's really not much to cheer for.
Exactly. All right, buddy, let's get out of here.
All right, man. Well, sounds good. It's good to be back. And you know what? It's exciting. I haven't been excited like this. Like last year, I think you and I were pretty subtle about the Leafs because it was just like disappointment. Yeah, although we got disappointment this year with the playoffs in the second round, I don't think I've seen this deep of a forward group in quite a few amount of years. The Kerfoots, they're gone. They're kind of the guys that Keefe kind of relied on that we really weren't cared for much about. I don't see those type of guys there this year unless it's Lafferty. But I'm excited. I want to see what this group does, and let's get it going. No better way to take out the rival Montreal Canadiens in your first game. So let's looking forward to it.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, make sure you hit that like button, smash that subscribe button. We'll have a lot more content for you. So again, thank you for listening, and we will speak to you next time. Have a good one.
Let's go Leafs.
Hey, that's usually my end line.